Hello, today we're meeting Dutch Bihary. He is international no face painting and body painting instructor and also known from TV. Hello, Dutch.
Hi.
Before we start, please like, subscribe and click the bell button to know when I post. I make a variety of time lapses, makeup tutorials and product reviews. So if that's what you enjoy, this is the channel for you. It's really nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. And yes, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Well, I'm from Washington State, and for those of you abroad that aren't familiar with our country, I'm on the uppermost northwest corner of our country, right by the Canadian border, about a mile or about an hour north of Seattle. And so it's beautiful, very woodsy, lots of evergreen trees and coastline. It's one of the prettiest states in our country. And I've lived here my whole life. I grew up in the mountains, logging and living on a self-sufficient farm. We raised our own livestock and grew our own produce and kind of grew up rough, kind of off the grid, all natural, which was a great way to grow up. I wouldn't change it for nothing. And then when I moved to the other side of the mountains, I decided to seek my fame and fortune as an artist. So, and that landed my first job right out of high school. I became a comic book illustrator. It's always what I wanted to be as a child, was a comic book illustrator. I read comic books. I loved comic books. I emulated, comic book heroes. I just wanted to be a superhero. And, so yeah, I naturally gravitated toward that. Some major influences artistically as a child were Frank Rosetta and Boris Vallejo, Simon Beasley. Oh gosh, there were a lot. A lot of my drawing styles, I think, came from like Bernie Wrightson and Pepe. But then I loved X-Men comic books back then, in that sort of golden age of the X-Men. Collected those comic books for a lot of years and emulated a lot of those drawing styles too. And, I thought I'd landed my dream job. I mean, I literally just put together a portfolio, went to this local comic book publishing company in Seattle and just said, look, and there's like, you're hired. And I was like, I thought it was going to be so much harder than that. But the caveat there is it was a horrible job. It was so hard and it was so stressful. And I learned so many life lessons in that short period of time I did that line of work. It did elevate my speed for sure. But I guess the wrap up to that story is looking upon that experience in hindsight. The reason I left was because I was kind of the whipping boy. I was always doing everything wrong. Everybody was always bullying me. The reality was there was a lot of senior illustrators that worked at this publishing company, and I threatened them terribly because I was this young kid. I drew better than them. I drew faster than them, and they were making my life miserable on purpose so that I would quit. And I didn't see any of that until years later when I was older and wiser and kind of saw what they were up to and had a little bit more life experience. So it's always been something that I've kind of had to deal with is, people being jealous. When you're naturally talented, there's a lot of ankle biters and people that want to try to tear you down. You just got to trudge through it and be the best you can be.
So just now, do you live on your own or with a family?
I'm married for 25 years. I've been with my wife for 31 years. We have two children, Aria and Zeta, both girls. Zeta's going to be turning 19
It's like my daughter.
next month. Yeah, and my oldest daughter's turning 20.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
So now it's life easier, is it? When they're growing up and they're like, it's different.
It's just a different version of the same for me. Yeah, I got a feeling they're going to be with us a while. That the old family norms are kind of out the window these days,
Yes.
and I'm thrilled if they want to stay under my roof. So
Yes, of
it's easier
course.
that way.
Yes, yes. Can you tell us where and how did you start face painting?
um,
Or body
I
painting, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so for a large portion of my adult life, I was a fitness instructor, personal trainer. I started out working at little health clubs and gyms, and eventually I had amassed so much education and certifications and schooling that I became an elite trainer, and I started training Olympic athletes, professional baseball players, and so forth. And the job over the period of time that I did it, nearly 18 years, changed drastically. The personal training used to be a really kind of laudable job. It was people looked up to them. We made pretty good money. We were kind of like therapists, and there weren't a whole lot of us. And then the market got massively saturated. And all these kids could just go to a hotel over the weekend and do a true false quiz and call themselves personal trainers. And the market got really saturated, which brought down all the median rates that you could charge. Basically, the more knowledge I amassed, the less money I was making. So everything was kind of going the wrong direction. And I finally found a really great, or at least at the time I thought it was a great job, working at kind of a gym that catered to just filthy, stinking rich people, and very, very exclusive. And I was paid very well. I was the lead trainer there, and everything was going great. And then one day I showed up to work, and the doors were locked, and there was an FBI notice taped to the window. The owner of the place that I worked had embezzled God knows how much money, hundreds of thousands of dollars from all of these rich clients, and then just disappeared. So I found myself out of work for the first time in my life. And at that time, my wife ran a magazine. It was a little kids directory. It's a franchise magazine that promotes child-related goods and services. And she ran the Pacific Northwest version of that little rag, and it was a lot of work. And she had to do all the layout, she had to do all the solicitations, everything. We had to take it to print, then we had to distribute it. It was so much work. It wasn't worth it. But one of the clients that was running an ad with us owned a pumpkin patch. One of the you-pick pumpkin patches where, you go there with your family and you grab a wheelbarrow and you go out into the field and you pick your own perfect pumpkin. And this little establishment had, they decided to kind of make it kind of like a theme park. So they got some old merry-go-rounds and a tractor that pulled a bunch of smaller little barrels with wheels on them, like a caterpillar, through the field. There was hay rides. And then they made these slingshots, big rubber band slingshots where you could launch the little tiny pumpkins and shoot things out in the field. They had a trebuchet, all kinds of stuff to kind of keep you interested in their, spending money on apple cider and hot cocoa and all the other things, right? And she had a face painter working there for the better part of a decade, and it had become something that the people that frequented her establishment, came accustomed to. And she just up and quit one day, just kind of left her high and dry with 2 days before the opening weekend of her pumpkin patch. And she was really worried that people were going to be disappointed that she didn't have somebody out there. So she called us hoping that we could refer her to a face painter, that, maybe a face painter had run an ad in our magazine, and we were like, yeah, sorry, we got a clown, we got a magician, but no face painter, sorry. And so then my wife just goes, well, Dutch can do it. And I'm like, what? I was like, get over here. I don't know anything about face painting. What are you trying to do? So we're having this little heated conversation, and she's like, come on, you're a good artist. You can figure it out. You got paintbrushes. And I was like, okay, sure, yeah. And I'll fill in until you find somebody else. I was unemployed. So my wife basically put me to work. And I knew nothing about it. Like I said, I grew up in the mountains.
When was it?
I knew nothing about face painting.
What's that? A long time ago.
2004.
Okay.
So it's been a while. Yeah. And so I went to a department store, and I bought this really terrible little set of face paints. It just said face paint on it. I didn't know what I was looking for, but it said face paint on it. Little plastic containers with the pop open lids, and And I just went out in the middle of this field and sat on this wooden construction stool, turned over sideways, that, you know, those old spools that they run wire and cable from. And I had a line all day long. The kids just like lined up for like 40 kids deep in my queue. And I didn't have a display board. I didn't have pricing. I didn't have pictures or nothing, but I just sat there and I painted kids all day long. And the parents were like, "Oh my gosh, you're the best face painter I've ever seen. Wow, you know, how long have you been doing this for?" And I'm like, let's see, 30 minutes. And so that's how I started. And so Google was still a fairly new thing back then. It existed, but not a whole lot of people knew about it or used it. And my wife's always been very tech savvy, so she knew about it. So we went home after that first night and we Googled face painting, and it was just like, it was this whole world of face and body art that I had no idea even existed. Yeah. And we looked into, you know, better paints, and I definitely emulated Nick and Brian Wolf right out of the box, because they were the only guys that were doing it that were doing dragons and monsters and zombies and kind of the stuff that I like to paint. Yes. And so I emulated them for a while. I as an artist, I really despise copying outright. It's kind of, I guess, a personal code of mine that I don't copy anybody. I'll definitely take inspiration from, yes, but I really have to do it my own way and kind of figure it out for myself if I want to feel gratified about the work that I'm doing. But when I saw Nick and Brian's stuff, it was just so lush, and the way that they would pose with their faces and wear their contact lenses and everything else just made the things that they had painted that much cooler. And so it was only a few years later I met Nick and Brian for the first time, and it was kind of a nice meeting with them, because I knew of them, but I'd never met them or reached out to them or communicated with them or anything. And then I wound up at this convention, and it was the first convention that I was teaching classes at. Oh, wait. Yes, I was teaching there. It was my first convention. I think I had one class, and because nobody knew who I was. And it was in Vegas, and it was so fun. This was back when Vegas was still amazing. Vegas is a pile of trash now, but this was back when Vegas was, still really kind of flying high. And they were mobbed. Nick and Brian, it's like they had groupies. It's like they were rock stars. They had just women following them everywhere. They couldn't come up for air. They had to talk and shaking hands and taking selfies. And so I saw that they were kind of mobbed, and I didn't want to be that goofy fanboy that was, just adding to that. And so I kind of gave them their space. And so I, when they were over here, I'd go over here. Well, then they would kind of wind up where I was, so I would go over there. And then they would kind of wind up where I was. Well, it turned out they wanted to meet me really bad. And so at one point, Nick came up and kind of put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, why don't we go grab? Let's get out of this, fracas and let's go talk real quick." And so we were given access to these little side lounges, kind of elite exclusive lounges where you can kind of get away from everybody. And so we went in and grabbed a bite to eat and had a beer. And he just said, "Look, I don't want to make this weird or anything, but I just want to let you know, I really like your work. It's really good. And, whenever me and Brian kind of run out of ideas, we go to your website and look at your stuff." And so it was like one of the best professional compliments I ever got. Because here's these guys, they were way up on this pedestal, and I was just this newbie coming in for the first time. And they've always been tremendously magnanimous and helpful and sharing. And we've become fast friends, and still are great friends to this day. So that was kind of a nice little story, about, getting a compliment, when you're so nervous that you don't even feel like you belong. You don't feel like, it's like, well, how did I get to be, a teacher amongst the likes of Mark Reed and Pasher and Nick and Brian Wolf? And gosh, this convention was incredible. It was literally a who's who. I mean, Weiser and Jay, they were still very new. It was one of their first conventions. And Vargas was there. So many big names were at this convention. It was just crazy. And I didn't know any of them. which was really bad.
That's what happens.
Kind of like,
That
do you know who I
happens.
am? It's like, no,
And also,
sorry, never heard of you before.
it's probably easier, like not easier, but for you, for guys, it's a bit more like harder to find yourself within the. It's mostly female community.
It is,
But
yeah.
But there are lots of male teachers though. So
yeah, well, I don't want to overly generalize.
Yeah, of course.
But it seems like the men, the creative input that the men drive artistically tends to be very, very different. You know, it's a different flavor than what the women do.
Yes, definitely, which adds nice balance to the whole community. I think.
Yeah, and it's not right or wrong or here or there. It's just different, and then you know, for the past several decades, I mean, being in this industry now, almost 2 decades, you know, guys like Nick and me and Michael Green and other artists that Avi, you know, we kind of see each other's stuff, and it's like, oh, that is so cool, but you want to put your own spin on it. So you want to take something that they've done and crank it up a few notches and make it even cooler and put your own spin on it, right? Rather than outright copying it. You know, Mateo's stuff is just so lush and colorful and well rendered. It photographs beautifully. When you get right up on top of it, you can see all the brush strokes and everything else. But when you see that presentation shot, it's stunning. You know, and some people, you know, they love that close-up tight detail. Some people like that overall presentation piece. Some people like the headdresses out there. There's a little bit for everybody. But I would definitely say I'm a purist. I stick to the paint. I don't do a lot of headdresses. I don't do a lot of makeup, you know, applications, special effects, add-ons, Eva foam. You know, I mean, from time to time I will. But it's usually because I'm painting in and amongst other people that are also using those types of implements, and I don't want my piece to, you know, not fit in with the group, so to speak. But I like to do all of my work with the paint purely. You know, I'm best known for the transformations and the 3D effects and kind of forcing your eye to see depth and protrusion that isn't actually there. And so I like people to be focusing on that rather than the accoutrement and all the other add-ons and stuff, you know, the gems and the glitter and all that stuff. And it's not an indictment on that.
It seems like women like more keen to use glitter.
Yeah, but I mean, in any art, you know, realm, you've got to set yourself apart. You know, you've got to kind of have your own thing.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest. Sorry. I would say the biggest, I guess, discouraging thing in our industry to me is everything seems to be becoming so formulaic. You know, if you can make sure you got every color of the rainbow in there and douse it in glitter, it's a good piece, you know. And then other forms of art are snubbed and or maybe not appreciated, you know, for the work and effort that goes. It's an story as old as time. It really is. I mean, on social media, I'll post some goofy little thing that I painted in 3 minutes on my arm, and I'll get 2,000 hits and 500 comments on it. And I'll post one of my favorite body paints that I've ever done, and I'll get a couple of thumbs up and a couple of likes, and I'll get comments like, "Yeah, it's good as usual," you know.
Very subjective.
I poured my soul into that piece of artwork, and I did this doodle, and everybody loved that. You know, so it's kind of fascinating what people latch onto and really like about your work.
Yes. Do you do parties? Or events? I
did. Yeah. For the longest time, we ran an event company. In essence, we catered to the largest companies in our area: Microsoft, Boeing, Amazon. You know, lots of those big companies. We would hire 40 to 50 other face painters from everywhere. We just basically anybody we could get our hands on. We would set up and do large scale events. I did do some kids parties from time to time, but and it's not like I think I'm too good or I'm too full of myself to do work like that. It was just mainly it's not really what I wanted to do, and so I didn't really advertise it. But over the years, you develop a clientele, you make relationships with people, and those particular people would have me back like every year for the 4th of July, barbecue that they do, or every the weekend before Halloween for their costume party, they would have me do custom makeups or whatever. So I did a lot of those sort of small, intimate things, but I didn't really advertise myself as a kid's party face painter. Mainly, I'm a big kind of muscular, kind of intimidating looking guy. Typically, my hair is in full regalia, I'm not really presenting that sort of professional party clown kind of
Not a regular,
guy that
yes,
you want to
not a
have at your little
regular
girl's princess
face
party.
Yes.
So, but I still did them. If they called me up, I would do them.
Yes. You probably already answered that question, but I'll just wanted to double check. Who inspired you in your career when you just started and now?
Some artists. I mean, I'm a huge Rosetta fan. I'm a huge H.R. Giger fan.
Oh yeah.
I love the fantasy, kind of dark fantasy, adventure. Dungeons and Dragons. That kind of stuff was really what I was into. As a kid, and that really drove my drawing style. When I got into body painting, it was kind of more of the same. I started getting into more mechanical stuff, biomechanical stuff, robotic stuff, cybernetic stuff, mainly because they were challenging. They were hard things to paint and make look good. A lot of people, I'd seen other people sort of take a stab at it, kind of a swing and a miss. It looked okay, but wasn't very realistic looking. And I thought, gosh, I could do that better, And so once I kind of figured out a formula for how to render some of those things, I just kept challenging myself to make it more intricate and more realistic and so forth and so on. So, but in the industry, like I said, Nick and Brian were, I wouldn't say I mean, emulated is kind of a bad word. But I definitely saw the work that they did and thought I'd like to see what my version of that would be. It was like I said, kind of a happy. It was competitive in the sense that we were trying to one up one another, but it was very magnanimous in the sense that there was no bitterness about it. Instead of bitterness, it was more like, "Oh, that is so sick! Why didn't I think of that?" And like I remember, I was at a Comic-Con and I painted a little boy, and he must have been 4 years old, and he said, "I want to be Darth Vader." I was like, cool, and it's not a very easy face paint to pull off. And I'd seen some versions of Nick and Brian giving it a stab, and I didn't really care for what they had come up with too. But I mean, on the fly, little kid, Darth Vader, you got to do the best you can. And what he told me before I even put the brush to his face was he wanted to be Darth Vader with his helmet on. Oh, that is so cool, And so this was way before the prequel movies had come out, and so the only version that I'd ever seen was from Return of the Jedi when he's dying and Luke takes his helmet off and you see all the scars on his head. He's got those dark purple circles under his eyes, and he's got his breathing apparatus. So basically, from the nose down, I did the breathing apparatus, and the scars and the dark circles, and it was such a fast, easy face paint. It looked so cool when it was done, and I remember posting that and showing Nick, and Nick's just like, "I hate you. That is how come I never thought to do that?" So instead of it being a sort of a bitter rivalry, it was sort of like we were just giving each other new ideas and broadening the horizons of what you could do, and everybody got to put another cool design in their little bag of tricks to pull out at a party or an event or something. So.
Where do you look for ideas, or how do you develop your design? Do you plan it beforehand when you're doing, for example, bigger body paint or something?
Almost never.
Okay.
There have been a handful of occasions where I've done a drawing, but invariably I wind up changing it anyway. I might come up with a concept, but so like Mateo, he pre-draws everything. He does the little paper doll printouts, and he gets his colored pencils out, and he really fleshes out all of his concepts, before he does them. And I really personally prefer to do it on the fly. I like to just kind of pull it right out of my head right there when I'm working on it. Sometimes that works to my advantage. I would say definitely some of the best things I've ever done have come from that. But then sometimes you get kind of stuck and you get kind of lost, painted into a corner, and maybe your stuff doesn't turn out, quite like you maybe initially envisioned it. Your vision changes over the course of an hour or two,
Yes,
and
that
you make
happens
concessions for time, and
often.
and maybe it doesn't turn out as grandiose as you had hoped it would. But I still prefer to kind of shoot from the hip and do things out of my head right there on the fly.
So your main themes are monsters or like technical stuff or something else? What do you reckon? What's your most known themes?
Some time ago, I can't remember what magazine it was. I was doing an interview for a magazine, and they said, the next question is, we want to know what inspires, and it was such a vague, broad question, and I nobody had really ever asked me that before. What inspires you? And I was like, wow. So I had to really kind of digest that and pick it apart in my brain and figure out, well, what is it that I like about the type of paintings that I do? And it's really not the subject matter. It's not that this is a cyborg robot, or that this is a mutated zombie, or that this is some sort of sinister looking alien. What it is the textures. I love textures. I love trying to render textures. I find it to be a challenge to render all those different textures in 3D, to make a leather texture look really like leather, to make skin folds and rolls, damaged skin, metallic things, like the robotics and stuff like that, make them look very angular and very sharp and very hard, yet it's just, a soft, human skin that I'm painting it on. I really want to challenge people's eye to see past the canvas and only see my artwork. So it's really more about the textures, and the subject matter just comes from interests from my youth, I guess. All the comic books I used to read and all the movies I used to watch, and I did dabble in special effects for some time when I was younger. Very, very difficult career to make a living at. So I kind of put that aside, in favor of things that were more lucrative. But I definitely, I like when I'm doing a zombie face and I'm doing the protruding cheekbones and the protruding brow, and then the recessed areas that maybe go all the way into flesh that's missing, showing the teeth through the side. It's like, well, how far can I go with that? That's kind of how I like to paint.
And do you have any artwork that you most identify with? You're proud of?
I think people probably know me best for the biomechanical type body paints, mainly because I kind of went through a phase. When I first started body painting, I really only did sponge and brush, and that was by choice. There was so many really prolific airbrush artists already, doing that. And I really wanted to kind of set myself apart and establish myself, not as just another airbrush guy trying to play catch up to, Alex Hansen or whatever. I wanted to kind of carve out my own little, I guess, new realm, that so people could see something different. And but then what happens is people say, oh yeah, well, Dutch only does sponge and brush. He doesn't do airbrush. And because I would get comments, oh, did you airbrush that? Well, no, that's sponge and brush. And then everyone got to know me as this sponge and brush guy. And I kept seeing comments, oh, Dutch doesn't airbrush. I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I've been airbrushing since I was 15 years old. So that kind of prompted me to maybe kind of flex a little bit and airbrush, and so I started getting into airbrush body art, and then ultimately I just kind of landed on just a mix of both. I don't prefer one over the other at this point. When I was on the television show, I was really unable to airbrush because the product that they had provided for us was past its shelf life. It was bad product, and so it didn't work. And so that really took away, something that could have really changed the outcome of a lot of my pieces. And airbrush is a much faster medium to work with if you're skilled at it. Yes. So I just dabble with both. I don't, like I said, prefer one over the other. Sometimes after I've airbrushed for several weeks, just for one reason or another, that's just what the job required of me. I'd love to just like put all that stuff aside and just pull out the cakes and the sponges and go to town, doing that. So I'm all over the board. But I mean, as far as like a style, I like the challenge of trying to render steel and metal and sort of altered flesh features and make them look convincing. So that all of those types of I guess the subject matter that I draw from definitely comes from science fiction, fantasy, even horror. Although I haven't been doing a whole lot of what I would say overtly scary stuff. I'm sure some people would disagree, but just alien and different. Sorry, I'm rambling.
That's right. Have you been in any magazines, TV, large projects?
Well,
you said
I've worked for some. Yeah. I've worked for some large clients. I have been in magazines. I've been on several television shows. I've been on some game shows. I used to get in the news all the time. I was one of the first face painters to work at our zoo, the local zoo in Seattle. And it seemed like I was getting them on the news all the time because I was doing these hyper realistic like chimpanzee faces, and things like that. And people had never seen face painting like that before, and just festival faces and whatnot. And it's like that wasn't really my jam. So, and I remember Avatar was coming out. What was it, like 90? I don't remember what year the first Avatar came out. It was a while back though. But I remember, no, it was in the 2000s. I'm sorry, it wasn't that far back. But anyway, the movie hadn't been released yet, but they had a lot of like posters and stuff. They were really promoting the heck out of it. And some kid came up and asked me for an avatar while I was at the zoo, and I painted that one avatar face, and I painted nothing but avatars for the rest of the day. It was just great. And then even for weeks after that, it was just avatar. And so I eventually put it on my display board. And people would come up to me, "Hey, are you the guy painting the avatars?"
Yes.
So yes. I did a pretty convincing illusion, broadening the upper bridge of the nose and changing the features enough. I think a lot of people, when they approach the avatar, they just give them the pink nose and the stripes, paint their face blue. They don't really do a whole lot with light and contrast and shadow to really change the facial features.
Face features,
yeah. So I mean that was why that one was fun for me, and obviously the result, was a hit. So.
Yes. But that's sometimes I feel like when somebody got the painting that everybody likes, then you don't have this much choice. You just have to go over the same design, and then you're bored. Painting the same, but
it's the same thing in every art. Willie Nelson, has probably written 5,000 songs, but he has to play "On the Road Again" in every one of his concerts. He probably hates that song by now. Yeah. So that's the truth. I mean, every art form, you get famous for that one thing, and everyone expects you to do that one thing.
Yes. So that's good that you don't have like very, very specific thing, because you would have to then keep to this all the time.
Yeah, I think I would get bored if I didn't have a challenge. And I'm not scattered or OCD or anything like that. But I mean, as anyone, would, I get bored, doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yes.
I like the challenge of kind of pushing things and coming up with something that people haven't seen before. I mean, that's really what we all do is like, well, hey, how can I come up with a new twist on an old theme and make it new again, and make it interesting again. Skulls. Wow. I mean, skulls. I mean, if you look at the history of face paint on just skulls alone, and you look at the artists that have attempted skulls, right now, I think Mexico is probably got the best artists. I mean, there's 3 or 4 guys out of Mexico that are just doing absolutely amazing skulls, just crushing it. And so like, I remember the first time I was at FABEC in Orlando, Florida, over there. Weiser was getting married, and the whole theme of the wedding was to be sugar skulls. And so everybody, all the face painters and all of the attendees, all of the people that paid to be at the convention, everyone got face painted as a sugar skull. And so I did I don't know how many I painted, but it was quite a few. And every single one of them was different. I did a Mexican cholo sugar skull. I did a skull that looked like ancient, like I used sepia tones and then did carvings in it, like runes. I did the pretty sort of traditional type, and then I did sort of the Alex Box elegant type. I did a butterfly one. I did a sunflower one. I did so many different sugar skulls, and every single one of them, I just insisted that they were all different. And the wedding was actually, pretty amazing. But that was a while ago. Things have changed.
Was it the actual wedding?
What's that?
Actual wedding.
We had the wedding at the convention, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think it was 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah, Google FABEC 2013. It's some amazing pictures.
I have to. Okay.
Alex Hansen, that was the first time I met him. He painted my face with an airbrush. So.
Have you competed in any competitions?
No, I don't compete by choice. I made my reputation in our industry teaching, and just on the merit of my own skill. I have a philosophical problem with competing artists. It doesn't work for me. I mean, the best analogy I could probably give you is let's take Picasso and Leonardo da Vinci, Andy Warhol, Banksy, and Michelangelo. And let's throw all those guys up on stage and you tell me who the best artist is.
No, you cannot say that, obviously.
You can't.
Yes.
It's purely subjective.
Yes.
It all boils down to what the judges want to see at that time.
Of course, yes.
The best artist one day wouldn't even be in the top 5 the next day.
Yes.
So it just it doesn't do anything to feed my soul.
Yes.
It doesn't do anything. It's stressful. I do judge competitions. I like to be in and around the energy of a competition. But just by proxy, the television show notwithstanding, I got talked into doing the television show. I actually turned down the television show 3 times before I finally agreed to do it. And I agreed to do it because I knew it was going to be a boon to our industry, that it was going to help kind of get body painting out of this sort of tawdry, cheap, kind of softcore porn, kind of naughty thing that everyone thought it was. It had a stereotype attached to it, and I thought that bringing it to the national stage, where everybody could see it for the art form that it truly is, that people would change their opinion of it, and it worked. To that end, that worked. The television show beyond that was, let's just call it inexperience.
Okay. Do you own your own brand or represent or support any brand?
No, I've helped other brands develop and grow. They've used my notoriety. I've done some promoting, some demoing for other brands that were up and coming and growing. But we've thought about it. We actually have discussed a product that we would possibly like to introduce to the market, possibly one day. But research and development costs and just time and life and raising kids just kind of, you
Yes.
know, we kind of got away from that. My wife, she basically ran my business. We called our company Contours Effects. We had all kinds of great T-shirts and jackets and stuff made, and yeah, like I said, we did a rather brisk trade with large corporate events and parties for quite a few years. But uh, we never really. I thought about doing a brush line, but everybody else had done a brush line, and basically they were all the exact same paintbrush, just with somebody else's name on it. And frankly, the paintbrushes weren't that good. So we looked into some other brands. The brand that I would have loved to have gotten my name on, unfortunately, dropped a lot of their great brushes. Unfortunately, they don't produce them anymore. So unfortunately for me, we bought a whole bunch of them before they stopped making them. So I've got a lifetime supply of the brushes that I love to use,
I see.
because you just can't get your hands on them anymore.
Is it a secret?
But
What brushes do you like?
I like the Low Cornell 797 series. The 795s are almost as nice, but the 797, they just there's the bristle count is slightly higher, and the length of the bristle is slightly shorter, and so that provides a little bit more bounce to the bristle. They bounce back better, which really helps with lining and filigree. There's not as much retention because the bristles are shorter. So, but if you know how to mix your paints properly, it's a fractional difference that doesn't make a big a difference in how you pull your lines. But the accuracy that they provide was superior in my opinion. And those are the ones that were the white handles with the blue backs, as opposed to the yellow handles with the blue backs from the Low Cornell line. They used to sell them loose at our local art stores. You could just go buy one here or one there. But it turns out that was a bad selling modality for the stores. They were getting a lot of theft. And so they dropped those lines in favor of pre-packaged brushes that were coming in a full set. People were less likely to try to steal those. And then eventually they just stopped making that particular line of brushes. And it was really unfortunate. I've really never used a brush as good as that brush, in all honesty. And I use them for everything. I use them for my canvas painting and everything else too. So they're just great brushes all the way around.
Do you run any Facebook groups or face paint or forums or shops? Just
we started. We thought there was all these kind of frivolous, goofy holidays. Like, hey, it's National Donut Day, or it's National Hug Your Grandma Day, or whatever. So my wife tried to legally and officially establish a National Face Painting Day. And in an attempt to try to draw attention to that, we did launch a site for that. It never caught on, unfortunately, and they told us, no, you can't have a National Face Paint Day, which I thought was.
What was the reason for that? Why was it?
I don't know. I don't think a lot of these national days, especially the more frivolous ones, are actually legitimate. I think it's just marketing and how many people catch on to it. So, but it's there. We did. I help another gal with a fitness forum, a fitness group on social media, on Facebook, the Fit Face Painter. Because I had so much, personal training knowledge, and a lot of people really kind of struggle with, good information about fitness goals. And I figured, well, that was kind of another chapter of my life that I, got a lot of, knowledge on. So, I do post on there from time to time. I help people answer questions if they have them.
Yes.
It's really more of just a motivational site. Just encourage people to keep going. She has monthly challenges, like this month it's push-ups and planks, the month before it might have been sit-ups or something like that. And so everyone is just sort of encouraged to do as many as they can and take a little video of themselves doing it.
With our job, when we are painting, sitting like in front of the with our workstation, it's good to have some exercise on the side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, exercise is a big deal for me. I feel so much better when I do exercise.
Definitely.
Sometimes, given the work that I do presently, I get really run down. It's a very physical, demanding job, and sometimes I think I logic it out in my head. Maybe I should take a break from exercising to recoup some energy because I'm feeling kind of run down, and I actually feel worse when I don't exercise.
Yes.
I actually have more energy even on the days that I work really, really hard. So, so I try to do some kind of exercise, even if it's a little bit every day if I can.
Yeah. Speaking about this group, I am in this group and I see your posts often, but I'm not posting anything there because I'm not exercising that much recently. But it's nice to actually to see these posts in your line, on your social media and think, okay, maybe I should do something.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people say that it's been very inspiring and encouraging for them, and I mean that's great. And if in some way, my personal fitness journey inspires someone else to make a positive change in their life, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
That's why I did the work. That's why I teach. That's why I don't compete. I like to keep everything positive. It's a giving, it's a sharing kind of thing, and it makes you feel good. It's like Christmas time. It always feels better to give the gift than get it, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm always quick with a pointer with the face paint. I've never been stingy about answering questions. I field questions literally daily on Messenger. People, hey, how did you do that? Or, hey, remember that one thing you did? What color was that? Or whatever, or, hey, if I wanted to do this, how would you approach doing that? Could you help me with the steps? And so I'm always helping people with the face paint stuff. And I do get some people asking me fitness questions, but not as much, which, is a shame. I'm an absolute wellspring of knowledge. It's what I did for most of my adult life before I got back into my art. I've got certifications in anatomy and physiology, as well as biomechanics and kinesiology. I think I have 9 certifications or something. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I know quite a bit. And I did used to train professional athletes and Olympiads. And I trained professional kayakers and Tour de France cyclists, hockey players, professional baseball players, bodybuilders. So I trained a lot of people on an elite level. So
I need to speak to you off camera to ask some advice. Right. What do you like about the face painting world?
I don't know. It's kind of like almost like a club. It's a lot of people that ultimately, I think. At the root of it, everyone wants to make money. Let's be really honest about that. Everyone wants to make money, and everyone knows that they can make money if they can elevate their skill set, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of people try to take the gimmick route. Hey, if I do this, then maybe that will translate into more money. They're always trying to come up with a gimmick to speed up their line flow, crank out face paints faster, things like that. There's that mindset, but then there's the mindset of, hey, well, if you're just a kick-ass artist and you're just really, really good, and that kid's face just beams, and lights up when you're done painting them, because what you've provided for them is, the best that they've ever gotten. That's a moment. And so that's the kind of face painter I want to be. I like the razzle dazzle. I love it when I pop that mirror in front of their face, and I think they've got a certain expectation of what they're going to see, and it's like way better than that. That's kind of why I.
Moment. Yes.
Yeah. So, and then there's other women with different mentalities. It's just all about, I mean, take a roller and roll it across the kid's face. Next, next. I was never that way. It drove my wife insane. My wife's mentality was the more people we can get in and out of the chairs, the fastest, the more money we're going to make in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And my mentality was more of the long game, where if I could establish people that loved me and cherished the work that I did,
Yes.
then I would have constant repeat business, which turned out to be the case. I mean, I've got children that I literally painted from when they were toddlers all the way up till they were graduating high school.
Yes.
And they would come back every year to get the same face paint, because that was such an amazing experience for them, and they remembered it and they cherished it, and they compiled the photos, over 15 years of growth, So I don't know. It's those impactful moments, I think, that you're looking for, and what's funny is I don't like to use the term photographic, but I do have, in a sense, a photographic memory. It's probably why I can remember how to draw, all the stuff, and render it on the fly when people come up with odd requests, which I love more than anything else, by the way. I love it when people just come up and just throw something completely bizarre out and say, "Can you paint this?"
Yes,
I'm just like,
that's
yes,
like,
I
okay,
can.
let's do that.
Yeah, it's so much funner than another butterfly.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
You know what's happening sometimes? Like, I say, can you show me the picture? Because sometimes I don't know the character, and they show me the picture of a face paint.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and I say, oh, I don't copy other face painters. Just give me the real picture.
Yeah, I get that a lot for the custom parties. Particularly for Halloween or something like that, they'll say, "Can you paint this?" I'm like, "Well, I can paint something like that."
Something like that. Yes.
And most of the time, I can say I'll probably do a better job. But just afford me the latitude to be able to create for you, and I'll make sure you're happy, kind of thing. But yeah, sometimes they just want what they want. That's why I stopped tattooing. I wasn't creating; I was copying. Everything was just tracing and coloring. And so I mean, I'm good at tattooing. It's not hard to be a good tattoo artist. There's a lot of stigma surrounding tattooing. It's really not as hard as I think the industry at large wants everyone to think it is. It's not a hard job, but what was hard for me was people would just show up with their iPhone and I want this. Yes. I want it to look just like this. And I'm like, well, that's terrible. Why would you want that permanently on your body? I could do a much better version of that. Let me create something original for you that would have some notoriety, that isn't just some carbon copy of what somebody else has already done.
Yes.
And that's why I stopped doing it. It wasn't doing any original art. Very seldom did I have a customer that would come in and trust me to do my form of art on them. And the ones that did loved it. I mean, they were super appreciative of it, but people just don't have that trust, I guess. The tattooing is just really more of they see something, it's quaint, makes them laugh or something, and they say, "Yeah, I want that." Okay.
You kind of have to grow your own reputation, your own images, and that takes a long time before they actually start trusting you. And you also need to develop this style, the particular style actually, so they want actually your own painting. And that is very difficult, especially when you want, if you don't want to narrow down to particular topics. So that is
well, look, if I became destitute and I had to make a living doing something, I could easily go back to tattooing. I mean, work is work is work. I've had worse jobs, but it wasn't feeding my soul artistically like I thought it was going to. And I will admit, I jumped the gun a little bit because, I kind of cashed in on my notoriety from the television show initially. People knew me from that. But they still didn't really know what like you said, like my style was. And so they would come up with their own art. And it was usually a photograph of a tattoo that somebody else had gotten. And so it was like, it just felt so wrong to copy anybody else's artwork. And so, I mean, I turned a lot of work away, which is bad for business. And then there was other types of tattooing that I just didn't really want to do. Lots of guys want large, like Gothic lettering, across their back. It's like, I know this guy down the street that does that, and he's really good at it. Go see that guy. Or like the Sailor Jerry, Ed Hardy type, cartoony, classic tattoo look. It's like, I like realism. I like, or at least modern, tattooing. New school, if you will. But hey, there's a guy down the road that's all he does is Sailor Jerry stuff. So go see that guy. So I was referring work to a lot of other shops, which was, not common. Typically, tattoo artists compete fiercely for clientele. So I was giving all of my clients to other shops because they were presenting work to me that I just really wasn't interested in doing.
And do you come across any difficulties being a body painting artist?
Difficulties?
Not. I don't mean like technically, but maybe like some situations. If not, that's
my
fine.
very first situation, not to do too much information or anything, but my wife and I, early on in our relationship, before we got married, had a bit of a rocky patch that revolved around jealousy. And I was bouncing. I was getting a lot of attention from women at this establishment that I was working at, and it caused some stress in our relationship for a while. And we worked through it, got past it, got married and everything. And then when I became a body painter or a face painter, the next inevitable step was to maybe dabble in some body art. And I didn't want to put my wife through any consternation or undue stress with, worrying about me painting, naked women. And so I was, I had resolved in my own mind that wasn't something that I was going to do. And then she kind of actually pushed me into it. But with, the understanding that she would be present and it would be strictly professional. We do only, we prefer what we refer to as PG-13 body art, meaning that the women are covered. She's wearing bottoms and pasties. We don't do full nudes. And I mean, we're in places where things are a little bit more relaxed. It's different now that I've been doing it for so long. But initially, I wanted my wife to be comfortable and confident that it was strictly about the art. But the very, very first commission I ever got, the very first time I ever did a body painting, it was almost like it was that scenario that everybody dreads, where basically this guy lied to us. We actually made him sign a little contract, a little writ that we had come up with, saying that we are only going to paint this, blah 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 blah. We're not going to do anything sexual in nature, blah 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 blah. And the whole thing was this guy shooting a naughty video. So I would paint something on this gal, and then he would take her out of the paint room up to the photography room, and he would shoot her. Well, we had to stay in the paint room. This was his way of keeping us away from his true intent, so to speak. And then he'd bring the model back down to me, and then we would paint some more on her. Well, so right out of the gate, right as soon as we got there, he introduced me to the model. And we had signed the paperwork saying that we were going to be doing our PG-13 body paint. And the model literally just drops her robe, and she's buck naked with no pasties, no bottoms or anything on. And my wife and I are just kind of standing there like, and then the guy, he was a real manipulator. His response to us was, I forgot to tell her. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, my bad. Well, now that you've seen her, no big, right? So let's just proceed. So he kept pushing and getting away with more. Well, after the third, so I had painted this really lovely, it was like a string of bouquets across her body that kind of was kind of asymmetric and random, and it was It was yellow and red flaming tulips, all wrapped in ribbon, and it had a real. Actually a gorgeous painting. And then he's like, "Now I want you to take and write slut and bitch and stuff all over, you know." And I was just like, and he's like, "This is my art, this is my art. You got to help me with my art, And he kept trying to kind of push us, And then by the third installment, a modification to the body paint, I was just like, "Yeah, we're done. We're leaving." Because what happened was, I mean, my children were babies, and they were still in their little car carrying buckets, and I think I had to go to the bathroom or something, and so I left the painting area, and I had to walk up a short flight of stairs, and then I actually caught a glimpse of what he was photographing, and it was X-rated garbage, and I was like, "All right, we're leaving," because I didn't want my work attached to that. Here I was, trying to keep it pure and honest and just about painting, and this guy was, making a dirty movie, and I was like, "All right, we're leaving." So I almost never did it again. The body painting was gonna be a one and done thing. Fortunately, I didn't. I've never had another experience like that ever since. The body painting community at large is very respectful and very professional.
It is, yes.
It's hard to explain to people that aren't in the business or don't travel in the same social circles with face and body painters, to explain to them that you can't be in those two headspaces at the same time. You can't be thinking about sex while trying to create art. Your brain can't do those two things at the same time, and so it really is about the art. And I mean, there are some people that I think push those boundaries a little bit, or have in the past, but you don't see a whole lot of it anymore. So
I think
and that's a good thing.
It's
because I've always been kind of a crusader for kind of pulling body painting out of the stigma that was attached to it for so long, and presenting it as the fine art that it should be. But in doing that, you have to have cooperation with the entire community to keep those standards high. And so if this one guy is doing dirty movies with body paint, it kind of cheapens, because that might be somebody else's first experience ever seeing body art. And that's going to cheapen it, the entire industry, so to speak. So I would say overwhelmingly, for the most part, people keep it very tasteful. So, and that's a good thing.
Do you have any funny stories during the face or body painting events?
I got a million stories. I got a funny story about another body painter.
Well, if you're okay to tell that, and if they're okay to share.
Oh, it's harmless. Yeah, no. Just how when you got a new person to an industry and you've got sort of the old guard, the seasoned people that have been doing it for a lot of years. Because the face and body paint world is so magnanimous and sharing. A lot of these guys have been doing it for a long time. They might be intimidating at first, but you realize they're just, big pussycats, and they're more than happy to help or give you pointers and things like that. Well, I was actually doing special effects makeup for a movie in Haiti. And I was coming back to a convention. I think it was the same Vegas convention I was telling you about earlier. It was one of the first conventions I'd ever done. And so I got off the plane from Haiti in Florida, and I got on another plane to go to Vegas from Florida. And as I was sitting down, another body painter got on the plane. It was Mark Reed. And I recognized him, and I was like, "Whoa!" And he recognized me, and we sat there and talked. And Mark Reed, back then when he was younger, he had a little more machismo, and he kind of, he was a big name, and he liked that status and that position. And so he was sort of taking me under his wing, and he's like, "Hey, do you have how are you getting from the airport to the hotel?" I was like, "I don't know. I was just going to get a taxi or something." And he's just like, "Well, they're sending a limousine for me to pick me up. And if you'd like, you could ride with me in my limousine." I was like, "Ooh, that'd be great. I've never been in a limousine before." And so we get off the plane, and we're collecting our luggage. And he says, okay, so over here, keep your eyes out for somebody with a sign. You'll see somebody holding up a sign that says Mark Reed on it, and that'll be our limousine driver. I was like, okay. So I'm looking. Well, there was no person holding a sign for Mark Reed, but there was a person holding a sign for Dutch. And so I looked over to Mark and I said, hey, would you like to ride with me in my limousine?
Oh.
So it's a harmless little funny story. It was just because I think I'm almost positive that was the first convention that I ever taught at, and so it was just kind of funny how it unfolded.
Wow.
I kind of hit the scene kind of hard. I think the people that had been body painting had been already body painting for a long time, and everybody had kind of seen what they had to offer, and the stuff that I was doing was just so different than what anybody else had seen. And so I think I'm very fortunate that I got into the industry at the time that I did, because I made a really big splash. I was able to make a really big name for myself right away. And then shortly after that, maybe 5 years later, then there was this mass exodus, this huge confluence of new artists just coming out of the woodwork, everywhere. It went from 15 to 20 kind of well-known body artists to 80. And so I feel like I kind of got fortunate in the sense that I kind of get lumped in with some of those old originals, the Wolf Brothers and Mark Reed and Asher and stuff like that. But yet I'm still kind of keeping up with the young guys like your, Avi's and your Michaels and stuff like that. Michael learned a lot of stuff from me. I helped him out quite a bit when he was learning. Avi and I work very, very well together. We've done some demos together at Transworld, and we did some work overseas, over in Africa. When we did that thing with the Wolf Brothers. I guess it wasn't the brothers; it was just Nick. But yeah, that was the Africa one. That was right before the pandemic hit. And that was a really, really cool event. I have no idea where they got the money to do that, but they literally just cherry picked kind of a who's who of body artists, flew us all over to Africa. We stayed in a 5-star hotel, which we essentially had to ourselves. It was completely, there was nobody there. The hotel was empty. It was just us body painters, a handful of models, and the photographers in this giant hotel on the beach. We had the beach to ourselves every day, giant swimming pool to ourselves every day. It was a really, really cool experience. And so we did this sort of makeshift, almost like World Body Paint Festival, just on a much, much smaller level. And it was just basically exhibition. There was no competition involved. It was just, today we're going to paint, all of our themes are going to be based on water. And then we'd paint the models up, and then they would go up on stage, and they would do a little thing. And there was a DJ, it's Dutch Bihary, confetti flying in the air, and then the model would do a little turn on the stage. And that was that day. Yeah. And then the next day it was fire, and the next day it was air, and
I think I've heard of this event from many people.
You heard of it?
I've heard about this event.
Yeah.
I've heard, yes.
Well, it was a lot of fun. But I don't think it'll ever happen again. I don't think it caught on, so.
Maybe at some point after all this pandemic goes away. Well, it's kind of feels like it's nearly done, hopefully.
Yeah, thank God.
Yes, yes. What product, do you have any products that you couldn't live without?
My nighttime face mask. Well, for all of its, for all of the I guess bad press and history, everyone still loves Wolf White. I still have some Wolf White. I don't even know. I've been so out of the loop. I don't even know if they're in business anymore. But it's definitely the best white cake paint that you can get your hands on. I personally prefer Pache airbrushes because they're affordable and they're very versatile and they're very easy to get parts for. The parts are inexpensive. to a lesser degree, they're American made. The manufacturers here in the United States, Pache invented the airbrush. They were the first ones to invent it. Iwata and all those others didn't come along until 30 years later or something. But I love Pro Air for my airbrush body paint. Nobody's come close to making a product that works as well as that particular product. Although I will say EBA came out with a water-based line that is almost just as durable as the alcohol-based paint. But that being said, it's still, because it's so durable, it has the same qualities and characteristics when trying to remove. If you want a strong paint,
what is the paint?
What's that?
What is the paint that you're talking about?
European Body Art.
Okay.
EBA. Okay. Yeah. They're best known for their tattoo inks, for the airbrush tattoos, but they had a line of water-based airbrush paint for the longest time, but it was terrible. It was just awful. And I never would use it. But then they reformulated, and they came up with a new line. It's very similar to Pro Air in how it works and feels and shoots out of the gun. The only problem is they have a few problems with a few of their colors that are just kind of when you want a blue, you want a really, really good, lush, incredible blue. There's just a few of their colors that either need a little more pigment or possibly a different pigment option. And they'll figure it out eventually. This last 2-3 years with the pandemic and everything, I haven't been able to do a whole lot of body painting. I've done a handful. I haven't done a whole lot of face painting, just here and there. For the last 3 years, I've been working, 4 years technically, I've been sculpting. I've been working on large-scale sculptures for theme parks, roller coaster parks or family fun centers, mini golf, paintball, some theatrical props, things like that. But everything is really, really big. So that's the job I was mentioning earlier. That's very physical and taxing, and lots of long hours.
Yes.
So I think I worked almost 14 hours yesterday, and I'm probably going to have to work tomorrow, Sunday. Just because, you got to do what you got to do to get the project done, right?
Yes.
But another very exciting artistic twist in my near future, I just finished an NFT project. I'm not sure if you're familiar with NFTs. The face and body paint community seems to be a little slow to catch on to them, but it's a offshoot of Bitcoin. So it's a form of art that it's so hard to explain. It's so convoluted. But anyway, there's people making money in the crypto realm off of artwork. So it's a way to assign cryptocurrency to artwork, and it's like collectibles. So everything has a serial number and an ownership. You own that particular thing. You can resell it. It's like real art, but it's kind of like the stock market in a sense. People kind of buy and trade and sell and collect these NFTs. And so I'm working with a woman who used to be a Playboy centerfold, back when the Playboy Mansion and Hugh Hefner and all that stuff was happening back in the day. And so since Hugh Hefner's death, the Playboy Mansion was auctioned off, and that whole era is gone now. And I don't know if you're familiar, but a lot of body painters did a lot of body painting at the Playboy Mansion often.
I haven't.
Oh yeah, big soirees, big parties. They'd paint women in military costumes, or they'd paint them in bikinis, or they'd paint them in costumes, of some form. Every party was different. The Wolf Brothers used to do it a lot. Asher used to do it a lot. So it was the body paint industry is kind of tied to Playboy in a sense. And if you're not familiar with Playboy was sort of the the Gentleman's Magazine.
Yeah, I kind of know what is it, but like not very much familiar with that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. I mean, there was a lot more raunchy, hardcore magazines. Playboy was more sophisticated, more tasteful, and it was just supposed to be the centerfold was their motto was she was the girl next door, the pretty girl that didn't know she was as pretty as she was, and all the photography was sort of done in a way to accentuate her character as much as her form, so to speak. So it was very, very, very tastefully done. It was very artistic in its own way, I guess. But that era is long gone, unfortunately. And so this gal who once worked with Hugh, she was kind of one of his mainstays. She was kind of like his assistant in a sense. She wanted to see if she could help all of these other models that had worked over the decades for Playboy to sustain their notoriety and stay in the spotlight and so forth. And so she put together this NFT project, which I have been helping her draw. And so my lot in it is I've basically been drawing outfits, bikinis, blouses, evening gowns, hats, bracelets, you name it, just accessories. And then each of the models that were centerfolds for the magazine have a stylized drawing of them. So they're not photographs, but they're almost like a paper doll. And then they go through this random generation of multiple outfits. So literally thousands of different things. So one day she might have a gold necklace with a blue blouse and whatever, and the next picture will be completely different than that, but it's all the same model. And so it's a randomly generated thing. And then the way that they work it is there's going to be like 1,000 of these printed out that are just going to be like regular collectibles, but then out of those 1,000, maybe 10 of them are going to be kind of extra special and of a higher value and more collectible. And then out of those 10, maybe 2 of them are like super collectible. They're the rarities that you could sell for $1,000 kind of thing. And I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this because I'm just an artist and I don't do the back end of this type of thing.
You kind of get the idea. What you
it's a huge thing that a lot of people are unaware of that's happening. There's a lot of skepticism and pessimism about the Bitcoin markets and what's happening with them and whether it's even going to exist. But the reality is it's been around for almost 10 years now, and it's only grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. So it hasn't gone the other direction yet. So there's no indication that it's going to either. Just people speculating that it's not going to be around a whole lot longer. But it's like, well, hey, it's here now. And this gal's paying me very handsomely to draw silly little things on my iPad while I'm watching TV at night after work. So I'm going to do that. We're getting ready to roll out the second phase, which will be a lot more elaborate. So it's hopefully I'll be able to kind of slowly step away from the hard physical labor and go into something that's a little bit more up my alley with the illustrations.
That sounds very
in the future
interesting.
is also another comic book. She wants to do a comic book, which is right up my alley too. So it looks like we're going to be working for her for a number of years now. And these aren't things that are going to require all of my time either. So I'm hoping that once restrictions ease from COVID, I'm already going to 4 or 5 different conventions this year, and I expect that that's going to pick up again, and I'll be doing that a lot more. I am going to be coming over to London in October to Rosie's convention and teaching classes at that. And I expect that I'll be back at the Netherlands. I'll probably be invited back to Korea or Japan or Germany or some of these other places that host body artists and have conventions too. So looking forward to getting back into it.
Yes. Me too.
Yeah.
Have you ever forgotten anything from your kids? And if yes, how did you deal with this?
Have I ever done what with my kids?
Forgot something from your kid.
Oh, Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes like you'll forget like your stencils, and you're there to airbrush, and that's like devastating.
Yes.
But so you're scrounging around looking for pieces of cardboard or anything that you can cut up to make a stencil. That happens sometimes. Sometimes you forget to bring backup parts for your airbrushes, and like maybe you catch your foot on your airbrush hose and rip your airbrush off of the stand onto the floor, and you bend up your needle really bad, and you don't have a backup.
Okay.
That's rather devastating. Another reason why I like Pache airbrushes too, because the parts are cheap and they're easy to fix. The air nozzles and stuff like that, they're of a larger size, so you can kind of fix things quickly and get back to painting again. Where some of these Iwata parts are so tiny, like the fluid nozzles the size of a grain of rice, and you're you're set up next to a 20-foot speaker stack with a strobe light in your face with a go-go dancer that won't hold still, and you've got to troubleshoot your airbrush, and the parts are so tiny you can't even get your fingers on them. So that's why I like bigger, beefier tools, because it's easier to troubleshoot. But yeah, I would say the worst experience though was I was hired by Ducati, which is a Italian motorcycle company, for a magazine shoot. And I don't want to mention the brand name because I don't want to spread any bad blood or anything, but they had just launched a new line of paint, and they were very, very eager for me to use it and give them some feedback on what I thought of it. And so I'd gotten a whole batch of this paint for this particular job, and I cringe when I think about it. I'd never used the paint before. I'd never even practiced with it. I literally had just gotten it in the mail, and I went to go do this job. And we were at a studio in downtown Seattle, and it was at a nightclub, and they had a rotating platform, like a rotating stage, and they put the motorcycle up on that, and I was to paint the model, to match the motorcycle. And the paint didn't work. The paint was, it literally, you sprayed it on, and then it would crackle and peel and flake off, and not in like some paints will kind of crack a little bit, but this paint, it was almost like it made a plastic coating that then crackled and like just flaked and flew off in the air. And I'm just like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. And so I wrestled with that paint for so long, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And I did have my sponge and brush kit, and I wound up having to try to do the whole thing with the sponge and brush kit. But I was so behind on the timeline already because of, the paint that I'd used, that unfortunately the work just didn't turn out very good, and I didn't get hired back with them. And that was really unfortunate because Ducati is a rather prestigious name to work for, and I feel like I kind of flubbed that job, not because of my skill, but because I trusted a new product that I'd never tried before.
Yeah, what can
So
you
word
do?
to the wise, always practice with your product before you take it into the field.
Yeah. True. Do you have any other professional background?
Yeah, I was infrared thermographer for nearly 5 years, which is kind of a high-tech preventative maintenance inspection using infrared equipment. I used to inspect high-voltage equipment. Like I said, I was a professional fitness instructor, physical therapist, whatever, for almost 18 years, most of my adult life. And I illustrated comic books, so I was a comic book illustrator. And I've done lots of odd jobs, but as far as like something that I could call a professional trade, that's probably it, I guess. Sculpting right now, to me, is just another form of art.
Yes.
I didn't know I was going to be good at it. It just sort of happened. It was really kind of almost an accident. I didn't intend for it to supersede my face and body painting. I was really just hired to paint. I met the guy, as chance would have it, through an associate of mine who I often would donate my time to a charity called Magic Wheelchair. And Magic Wheelchair is a charity that helps kids that literally have to live their entire life in life-sustaining wheelchairs to experience what it's like to dress up in a costume and have fun. And so we turn their wheelchairs into, X-Wing fighters from Star Wars, or we turn them into dragons or whatever, right? And so, and then they get to wear, a little bit of a costume and be that person and go around through a Comic-Con or go trick-or-treating or whatever. And so I was hired by Twitch, which is an online viewing platform, to do a demo on stage at Comic-Con. And so I got free passes. So I brought the family. We were checking out the convention, and I saw that Magic Wheelchair had a booth there. And I was like, oh, hey, guys, so I was kind of catching up with them. And they were getting ready to unveil their latest wheelchair, which was based on Stranger Things. And so it had the big monster from Stranger Things attached to the back of the wheelchair. And I was like, that is an incredible piece. I mean, how did you make that? I was really curious about how they pulled it off. And I was kind of kidding with them. I was like, it's an amazing sculpture, but it's a shame about the paint job. And I was kind of kidding them. And they're like, yeah, if we only knew somebody who could paint. And so anyway, so they gave me the business card of this guy who runs this foam shop that I work for presently. And they said, yeah, he's up in Burlington. I was like, that's where I live. And so we enjoyed the rest of our weekend. And when I got back on Monday, I was going through my swag bag with all the stuff I'd gotten from the convention, and I found that business card. I thought, oh, I'll give him a call. So I called him up, and he literally answered the phone. Is this Dutch? I was like, yeah, matter of fact. And so we met that very same day, and he was desperate. He had a project that he was way behind on, and he didn't have a painter on his staff that could paint it the way that they couldn't give it the treatment that it needed, that the customer wanted. And so he was really, really looking for, an airbrush artist that could pull it off. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that for you. And so I did it in an afternoon, and he was like, wow. And so he hired me for a couple other small jobs after that. Well, came time to collect, and I went in to go pick up a check. I hadn't heard from him for a few weeks, so I figured I'd better go see him in person. And he's like, oh, yeah, I can't talk to you right now. I'm on a conference call. Why don't you go out and go play with some foam for a little while? And I was like, okay. Because he had this large pile of just scraps, giant scraps. And I was just thinking, oh, boy, I could do some cool stuff with that. Right. And so I grabbed a piece of this or a piece of that, and I started kind of just messing with it and sculpting it and rasping it. And I made an alien pet, from the movie Aliens. And he came out of his meeting 20 minutes later, and he's like, did you just make that just now? And I was like, well, yeah. He's just like, do you want to work for me? And I was like, yeah, I kind of own my own business. I do pretty good, I don't really want to be a wage slave. Thanks anyway. I kind of shined him on. And he's like, well, what if I made it worth your while? And so we talked, and we came to an agreement, and I've been working there ever since. And, he's been pretty good about, like if I have to go to a convention for a week, or if I have to travel, overseas for a little while to do another show or something, he'll give me the time off to do that. But lately, it's been very, very busy. The jobs just keep getting bigger and bigger. The clients get bigger and bigger. We just did a huge mini golf course for Royal Caribbean that they put on the biggest cruise ship in the world. You know how big they are already. This one's like bigger than those. It's having its grand unveiling, and it's going to break all the records for being the biggest cruise ship. And we just made a big underwater themed mini golf course that they installed on the top deck. So that took a lot of time. And now we're working on another mini golf course that every single hole is based on a Hollywood movie. So like Jurassic Park is one hole, and Jaws is another hole, and Back to the Future, and so forth and so on. So we're doing all these large scale sculptures. We got a giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, and I'm working on the T-Rex right now. So, but it's hard. I'm 50 years old, and it's getting hard on my body. And I would love to just go back to painting and drawing again at this point. So,
I see, I see. So, do you have any other hobbies apart from what you? Well, you've mentioned quite a lot of things that you were doing to
well,
innovate.
I grew up kind of a skateboard guy. I love riding skateboards. I love snowboarding. I really love winter sports: snowmobiling, snowboarding, snowshoeing, any kind of skiing, hiking. I don't know why. I just love the snow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was raised in the mountains, so I guess it stands to reason.
Yeah.
My wife was raised in Hawaii, so she loves beaches and oceans. So, we're a product of our environment, I guess. But that's pretty much it. I mean, art really is a hobby.
Yes, yes. And you're doing
Uh,
sculpting, painting. You're doing canvas art as well, is that right?
yeah. I mean, I'll do art anything I can get my hands on. I do
Mm.
murals. I do a lot of wood burning lately,
Mm.
leather burning. Uh, yeah, I mean, I like to challenge myself. Anything I can get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
Being that I'm kind of um, how do you put it without sounding bad? I was born with a gift, so to speak. I was born with a innate talent, and I can really apply it to just about anything. There's just sort of a natural understanding. Call it paradigm thinking, whatever you want to call it. But I can really break down a new medium that I've never even laid my hands on before, and I can do it and make it look like I've been doing it for a very long time. And like I know what I'm doing. Fake it till you make it, so to speak, but maybe even at a higher level. The very first tattoo that I ever did was a realistic octopus on a guy's shoulder, and I'd never even picked up a tattoo gun before. I just literally just did it. I have a picture in my phone. I can show you.
Yeah, you can send
And
it so I can add it later to the video.
yeah. And so, I mean, it's just one of those things where I've always kind of had this ability to just sort of pick something up and make it look really, really good, and convincing enough to suggest that I had done it before or that I had a background in that particular type of art. And I simply just do it for whimsy and just fun. Woodburning, I find is very, very fun. It's very therapeutic. It's got a pace or a flow to the rendering that's very different from painting and drawing. When you paint and draw, it seems that the most successful people are the ones that figure out the techniques and the tricks to do it quickly, to render something that looks like you spent 5 hours on it, but you did it in 30 minutes, and at least that's kind of been my MO in my teaching approach, is teaching people tips and tricks on how to make it look like you spent a lot of time on something, but you really didn't. But with wood burning, you're forced to a specific speed, and
Yes.
and boy, you can just really lose yourself in it. And it's like the only other thing I could probably compare that sensation to would be sculpting with clay. I used to do a lot of special effects, sculpting, silicone masks and things like that. So you always start with, a bust with clay, and you start working with that, and then you start making all the little fine wrinkles and all the fine pores and really detailing it out. And you can, I mean, you don't even realize it, but whoa, I've been doing this for 8 hours, and it feels like you just started. That's kind of the same sensation I get from wood burning. I can waste a whole day doing it and not even realize how long I've spent on it. Where face painting and airbrushing and even illustrating, like comic books, it's just as quick as you can get it done, kind of thing. And then 30 minutes later you're finished, and you're like, that turned out really good. But with wood burning, it's like, so the time just kind of, you get into this little time bubble, and you kind of lose all sense of how much time it's taking you to do something. So it makes you feel, I don't know, it makes me happy, I guess. The long and short of that explanation is when I'm done, I always kind of step away, kind of going
way of your way of relaxation, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I said, it's like order from chaos. You know, it's kind of just you really have to divorce your mind from other thought and really focus on what you're doing, and then you do that for a long enough period of time that when you kind of flash back into reality, it's kind of like, oh well, the day's over.
Yes, yes. And if you weren't in your profession, if you weren't doing art, and if you weren't doing any, what is it called? Like teaching, what is it called? With the body, bodybuilding?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh
What,
yeah.
what else would you do if you couldn't do either?
If I couldn't do personal training or
Personal
painting,
training, yes. And
oh gosh, um, I always thought it'd be kind of fun to be like a voice actor. Like the voices behind cartoons and stuff like that. I can make a lot of funny voices. I dabbled in singing when I was younger. I was in a band for a little while as the vocalist. Things are a little different now. I can't sing in the same ranges that I could when I was younger, so I'd have to modify that a little bit. But I don't know if I could make a living at it. But gosh, I don't know. There's so much I can do creatively that wouldn't necessarily revolve around typical forms of art too.
yeah.
I mean, for instance, there's a gentleman here locally in the town that I live in. He's kind of out on the outskirts of town, and he's kind of a throwback from the '60s, and he lives off grid with no electricity, and he makes homes, basically tree houses and earthen houses out of just everything that's out there, and it looks like Hobbiton from the movie.
Wow.
Only more fascinating in a way, because every little home, every little cave, every little dwelling that he makes is completely different from the last one, and it's a work of art in and of itself. But it's so natural. I mean, like, he'll take a tree and he'll split it, and just rough hewn lumber, but split it 2 inches thick, and then he'll heat it in a room with steam, and he'll pull it together into the shape of an onion, and then make the walls out of a tree that's just been spread. And I mean, it's beautiful, is what it is. And I every time I go there, I feel very, very at peace. It's almost like I would dare say, almost a spiritual experience. I feel like I belong there. So I mean, I being that I grew up very meager means, off grid, literally just fighting to survive. Very, very poor. We ate anything we could get our hands on. We did a lot of fishing and hunting to stock freezers for the winter, because we lived so far into the mountains that when it snowed, there was no getting in the car and going to town to go to the grocery store. Whatever we stocked, it was like ants. Whatever we stocked, that's what we lived on until the snow melted enough to where we could leave. And so I think I could possibly go back to a lifestyle like that if I absolutely had to, and live comfortably and happily. But I am a little spoiled now. I like my iPad, and
Yeah.
I like my Netflix, and there's a lot of creature comforts that I've grown accustomed to. But I think if I had to, I could rough it and lead a happy, fulfilling life. Maybe chainsaw carving. I don't know.
Speaking of the other, like you were speaking that you can live, whatever you can get, the food. How would your life change if you have unlimited amount of money? Whatever you can.
Wow. Well, I'd always fantasized that it would just be nice to just simply do art for the sake of art's sake. I live in a rather small home that's very modest. Like most artists, I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. And I guess I'd fantasize that if I had unlimited funds and resources, I would probably devote my life to radical forms of art that I could afford.
Mm-hmm.
large scale art.
Mm-hmm.
I would be able to have a studio that I could get messy in and do large scale, art projects, in and so that's probably how I would focus my time. I don't know if I would do it so much with the intent to sell and gain notoriety from it, but more just the experience of being able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of why I started working at the phone place. The first couple of years I worked there, I literally would just wake up and I would just jump out of bed. I was so eager to go to work because everything I was working on was so cool and fun and different and big and I discovered that I was really good at it. I had no idea I had that ability, but I was very adept at redactive sculpting, and redactive sculpting is not easy for a lot of people. People can't see the shape inside of the solid block and pull that
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah, you need to get used to this idea, and then if you cut too
Yeah,
much, you just cut too much. So,
yeah, and not only that, but I'm very fast at it too. And so I really, but now, like I said, it's changed because as an art, you never want to show everybody you never want to give 100% all the time because then people expect 100% all the time. And
mm.
so I had refined a lot of the processes in how we do these sculptures. And now I'm so proficient at it that my boss sort of just expects that I'm going to be able to keep up that pace all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting older, and I've got pains and aches and stuff like that, and the jobs just keep getting more and more and more hours, more and more time, larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he thinks I'm some cyborg from the future, that I'm just, so he's wearing me out. So it's not fun anymore. But yeah, I'd like to learn to weld. I think I've seen some amazing metal art. I'd like to maybe try my hand at that.
Mm-hmm.
Glass blowing is another thing. That is there's a craft to it. There's a meticulous steps and understanding that's required, and that's kind of what I like about the art that I do, is that deeper understanding of I know that if I do this, this, and this, the result will be this, and not a lot of people know that, and so that's why I kind of get away with some of the visuals that I pull off, where other people are kind of like, I'll try this, and I'll spread that, and maybe I'll take that back off and try that again, and they're kind of hunting and pecking and poking at it and hoping that their piece turns out. I know that if I do this, this, and this, that I'm going to get this. Like I said, it's a form of paradigm thinking. It's thinking 3 steps ahead of what you're actually working on, and so my brain just works very, very well that way. And so I guess it's no wonder that I was good at sculpting, because I could really see all of the stages of my process before I even executed them. So doing something like glass blowing, where attention to temperature, attention to pressure, all the various tools that they use to get the molten glass to do the things that it needs to do. I think I could really get into that. And incidentally, there is a glass blowing school that's opening up in our town here shortly. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I will always face and body paint. I don't think I'll ever stop. I really do enjoy it, and I still find joy in doing it. It hasn't gotten to the point where it's like, I gotta go face paint. It's usually like, oh, I gotta go face paint.
Yes.
My favorite part of face painting is at the specific conventions where we're teaching classes and trying to elevate the industry. I love the jams where all the classes are over and everybody's just in a big banquet room and everyone's just got their kits out and we're listening to music and we're drinking wine and we're laughing and reminiscing and painting all together as a big group. That's what I probably look forward to the most.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think also even when you get to the job to face paint or body painting, it's more interesting because you're talking to people. When you're doing murals, I used to do murals as well. I do them sometimes, but then you just talk to a wall,
Mm-hmm.
or you're just with a canvas. But when you paint people, You talk to
Oh yeah.
people, it's so different. That's why I don't think you can ever get bored doing that.
No. Oh, and I mean, to go back to one of our earlier questions, that's why I don't really like to pre-draw my pictures
Yeah.
because I might have an idea in my mind of a concept that I really want to paint.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a model, and she's the right, you know, body type for the type of work that I want to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish. But her personality could completely change my approach to painting her. You know,
Yes.
my
Yes, that's true.
interaction with her.
That's
I
true.
mean, a good example. I was painting in Canada with a friend. She put together a little gathering, and we started painting. And I really wanted to do something kind of on the aggressive sort of battle alien kind of look, like something that would be, a formidable thing to have to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily evil, but just very aggressive looking alien species was what I was going for, and I was going to implement some organic kind of biomechanic features, kind of natural organic armor, like a Guyver kind of thing, maybe even H.R. Giger-esque kind of alien kind of look
Mm-hmm.
to it, which I like so much. But I had this vision. It was a very strong vision in my head, and it was going to be in deep blues and dark greens with really bright yellow accents, almost like an insect.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met the model, she was this dainty little like flower child. She was just so yeah, she was just so pleasant that the personality didn't match at all this
Yeah.
concept that I had in my mind of what I wanted to paint that day. And what we wound up with on her was still very alien, but she was almost like an aquatic, almost like a seahorse kind of looking thing when we were done. Completely different color palette, and it was strictly driven by my interactions and communications with her.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
so
Yes.
sometimes you go in with a certain idea and it just gets modified so drastically because of the model, and that pairing of the model with the painting drives a lot of those creative changes. So
Mm-hmm.
and I just like to roll with it. I mean, why fight it? I mean, it's happening for a reason. I don't want to
Yes.
get too deep as to what's going on, but I mean, it's just something definitely uh, driving your decision making process and changing your creative thinking. When you interact with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and I still have that idea in my head if I get the opportunity, and I don't know, I wind up with some goth tattooed girl or something. I can do the evil alien on her later on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes. Yes. Um, what person dead or alive would you like to meet for dinner?
hmm, dead or alive? If I'm being greedy, my favorite painter, still to this day, is Frank Rosetta.
Okay.
And I don't think he gets. I mean, in certain circles, he gets a lot of accolades and acclaim.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I don't think he does. And I think his style of painting is what inspired me the most because he uses such a interesting array of colors.
Mm-hmm.
Like if like in body painting, it's very easy to kind of get stuck in this sort of monochromatic spectrum. Like if it's a, I don't know, I'm just pulling this out of thin air, but like let's say we're gonna do the swamp thing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be using basically a wide array of greens. Ranging from very light green and yellows to very dark green, and you're going to use your blacks and your whites, and you're going to create your color separations and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff to create the detail to pull that off. But when it's all said and done, and you see the photograph, it's going to be green. You know, where if he were to do the swamp thing, it would probably have pinks and purples and lavenders and
Mm-hmm.
mint colors and pastels. oranges and everything to pull off green, if you follow.
Yes,
Um, yeah, and if you look at his work, if you just sort of like grab a print and you just pour over all the colors involved in how he renders,
I need to Google
it's
him.
absolutely it's masterful.
I don't know
And
him actually. Can you say again his name?
Frank Rosetta. He was a best known for illustrating fantasy novel covers.
Yes, straight away I can see the covers. Yes.
When I was a young kid, I mean, once again, probably TMI. I was in a very abusive family situation, stepfathers, and so that is probably where I first started building my body. Becoming strong and muscular was sort of a defense thing. And then as I later in my life, he was gone. He was out of my life, and I found that I had kind of a natural genetic predisposition for muscle, more so than an average person. It was very easy for me to grow muscle, if you will. And so as I was learning form drawing and I was learning to draw and expanding upon my skills, my natural inclination, being that now I was a teenager and getting into comic books and things like that, was more toward super anatomy and very large muscles and things like that. And so I started to then get into heavier lifting and more actual, bodybuilding myself. So my art kind of went that direction. My personal life kind of went that direction. And at that time, the best I could do financially was in the personal training. I was very good at my job and I had really good credentials. It was the best way at the time to make a living. Art didn't really seem like an option for me because I didn't have a platform from which to do it from. The face painting, as we've discussed, was basically an accident. If you had told me, 20 years ago I was going to be a world famous face painter, I'd be like, huh? How does that happen? Yeah.
And do you have any movie that you can watch over and over?
Yeah, I've probably seen Breakfast Club about 100 times.
Okay.
I love anything Star Wars. The Aliens movies, I can watch those.
So what would be your favorite fictional character?
Favorite fictional character? Well, before it was cool, I always liked Wolverine. So I've liked the Wolverine character since I was about 11 years old, 12 years old, somewhere around there. And then, of course, now he's like, everybody knows him. But back then, nobody knew him. But I always thought he was a super cool character because he was an anti-hero. He kind of was gruff, but he was always right. And he wasn't super powered. He didn't have super strength. He didn't have super anything. He was just indestructible. And I always thought that was kind of a cool thing. And I guess in the same sense, you remember the movie The Incredibles?
Yes.
Yeah, I really identify with the dad. That whole first movie, because he was kind of over the hill, kind of old, kind of had a bit of a gut. But he still kind of wanted to be incredible, but life kind of was steering him in such a way that he couldn't be incredible. And then he had his kids and he felt very protective of them and kind of wanted to be incredible again. I can really identify with that entire story, the line of story there. As an artist, you'd be fooling yourself if you didn't do what you did, at least in some small part, for the accolades. I mean, we all want the pat on the back. We all want the people to say, "Hey, good job. Hey, that looks great." It makes you feel good. It motivates you to do more. Where I kind of had that little brush with pseudo celebrity with the TV show, I didn't particularly care for any sort of celebrity status. That wasn't a whole lot of fun, to be frank. But we do like the accolades for the efforts in our work. And so I always I guess I identified with that. I want to be incredible, though I'm not.
I believe that everybody is kind of their way incredible. Because
Yeah.
it was like the movie was about having your own feature and, being good at this feature and appreciating that as well. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. I love this movie.
It's nice. It's nice when you're appreciated for your efforts. That's for sure.
Yeah. Um, what is. What makes you angry?
That's a really good question. I don't really have any anger issues. I do get angry. I'm not going to sit there and say that I don't. But I'm an incredibly patient person, and I tend to internalize a lot of my anger. But the things that make me angry are when I guess being taken for granted and abused. Um, because I'm a big guy, muscularly, it's actually kind of amazing how much flack you get being a big person. It's almost like, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was in school, as a high schooler, kids would just they'd be really cruel to fat kids. They would pick on the fat kids, bully the fat kids. Well, I get bullied as a big guy. I'll be riding my bicycle, on a sunny day to get some exercise, and people will roll down their windows and yell hateful stuff at me because I'm big. I go to the gym and I hear guys talking, under their breath, and they're like, "Yeah, I could get that big too if I did steroids," and it's like, and it's like, so I kind of, those types of things kind of make me angry because I'm emphatically against steroids. I'm all natural, always have been. I've never even seen steroids in real life, much less used them. And just the fact that people complete strangers could just go out of their way to be mean or hurtful to somebody else, that makes me angry more than anything else, I think.
Yes.
It gets under my skin. I seethe over things like that because and for whatever reason, it seems to happen to me quite frequently. In a work environment, I get mad because, I think people expect too much of me. And then, this is probably the best example of what makes me mad is I work really, really hard on something. And then I'm finished with it. And then at that point, the manager or the supervisor comes out and says, "Yeah, now we need to change it." Instead of telling me at the beginning, they'll tell me at the end. And then because I have to change it, that adds more time to the project. And now I don't have time to paint it and give it the treatment that it deserves. And I have to do a really fast, cheesy paint job on it. And that seems to happen on just about every job that I've done in the past 2 years at this foam sculpting place. And that's why I'm kind of ready to move on. It's like, if I'm going to do a job, I want to do it. I want to be able to do a good job.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm working with one hand tied behind my back, and that makes me rather bitter and angry.
Yeah.
So, and plus I don't really get the credit for the work that I do there. And sometimes that bothers me too.
Something that's not fair as well, because if you do your project.
And they kind of take me for granted. Oh, well, Dutch will fix it. Oh, Dutch will do it. Dutch will make it look good. But then, I'm kind of like, well, what if I'm not here? What are you going to do then? So that's a handful of things that get me angry.
What is the last great book that you read? Can you advise any book that you think it's worth reading?
The last book that I really enjoyed was Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard.
So what kind of book is that?
It's fantasy, sci-fi adventure.
Okay.
With a message.
I see.
So I don't know if you're familiar with L. Ron Hubbard or not, but he
Not really.
invented Scientology, the religion. He was a science fiction novelist that started a religion that is well followed these days, which is very take it or leave it. I think it's kind of hilarious personally, but he's a great novelist, and the story was about kind of a dystopian future where Earth had been conquered easily by an alien race that basically came to ravage it for its resources, its iron and nickel and gold and so forth and so on. They were basically like intergalactic construction workers, and they were just strip mining the planet for everything, and had successfully eradicated almost all of the humans, except for just small pockets that were living in mountains and caves like cave people. And they had lost all of their language and their culture, and they were literally living almost like Neanderthals. And then the story is very Star Wars-esque in the sense that it's kind of this unassuming young hero that kind of turns everything around and saves the planet and drives the aliens away. So it's a great epic. They did give it a movie treatment back in the '90s, and it was just terrible. It was it's revered as one of the worst movies ever made, I think. John Travolta was in it. I mean, there was a lot of big actors in it, but it was just a stink bomb.
It doesn't provide a success, isn't it?
No, it didn't even come close to the book.
Yeah.
But very good story, very very interesting, very well written. And if you haven't seen the movie or haven't read the book, it's an enjoyable read. So that was the last kind of good book I read. I read graphic novels.
It's not much visible because of the background. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they're basically comic books, but they're written by novelists. So you get the best of both worlds. You get really, really good, high-quality writing and storytelling, but you also get great visuals. My favorite author has been, once again, and this is kind of the OG, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but the old-style gamer is what OG comes from. But I was a Neil Gaiman fan for 30 years. Now everybody knows who Neil Gaiman is. He writes screenplays and television shows, and all kinds of stuff. He's got a new series coming out based on this book, actually. This is The Sandman. So there's actually a live action television show coming out that they're doing with this. He did American Gods. He's worked on several movies. All kinds of cool stuff. He's one of the most creative writers I think I've ever read. He has a way of writing mythology in such a way, invented mythology that sounds like it actually would be a real one, like Norse mythology or, Egyptian mythology. And he has a way of really fleshing it out and making it very, very believable, which really drives the storytelling. So,
I think anyway. I know what you mean, because I have I read one author which is also connected with mythology. He's a Russian author, so it's not the same one, but it's kind of, it pulls you in and you want to learn more about even mythology because of that, and you know that it's kind of based on the real facts, and that makes it even more like you don't know where is this edge, where is this actual story of the book, or what is the background of that. So
Yeah, so he's a part of a family of personifications of the essence of existence. So despair and desire are his sisters. Death is his sister. Dream, he's dream. So his whole realm is the realm of dream. And just the way that he writes it. And then he incorporates Judeo-Christian stories. He's got Cain and Abel in his stories all the time. They're actually characters in the book. And then he pulls in North and Greek mythologies, as well as Egyptian mythologies and made up mythologies that you've never even heard of before. And they're all of these characters, and he writes them so effortlessly and poignantly, if I'm being frank. I mean, And then every book has a message too. It's not just. It's very heavy. It's very heavy reading. You kind of put the book down. You're kind of like, whoa. So I don't know. Every single thing I've ever read of his, I've just absolutely enjoyed. So
Cool. Okay. What is the most inspirational place that you visited?
The William Ricketts exhibit in the Dandenong Mountains in Australia.
Okay, I'll need to search it up. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I will.
William Ricketts was an Australian national that tried to understand Aboriginal culture. The story of the Australians and the Aboriginals is very, very close to the story of the settlers and the Native American Indians in the United States. We basically just eradicated them, took them over, wiped them out, took advantage of them in all the worst ways. Same thing happened to the Aboriginals in Australia. And the difference with he wanted to befriend the elders of an Aboriginal tribe and would sit on the periphery of the circle. Or Aboriginals was literally just sit in a circle in the middle of the dirt for like days and just chant and meditate and communicate in nonverbal ways and so forth and so on. And he was never allowed any latitude to be involved in any of that. They weren't going to just like befriend him and let him in. He was an outsider. He didn't belong, blah, blah, blah. Well, he proceeded to do this for, I believe it was like 15 years. And then one day he was invited into the circle. And he devoted his entire artistic career into creating all natural organic sculptures of Aboriginals in an earthen environment. So he would put the faces of children in trees, actual trees. The trees would grow around the faces. He would add them to boulders and rocks. And when you walk through this, it's a wildlife preserve is what it is. So it's protected by the government. And it's basically a path through the Dandenong gum tree forest. And everywhere you look, in all the little shrubberies, there's little Aboriginals and elders sitting next to trees and stuff like that. And it tells this amazing story. And it was the one true time I've seen an artistic exhibit where I actually felt like I was having a spiritual awakening sort of experience. And everyone kind of has their own little, take on those types of experiences. I'm not going to assign any specific spirituality to it other than the fact to say that it was very profound and it affected me deeply. We did it on a whim. The gal who was hosting me for workshops in Australia had some shopping to do, and she said, I'm going to be busy for an hour or two. Would you like to go do something? I was like, I don't know, just drop me off and I'll go wander around somewhere. Well, on the way, we saw this William Ricketts things out in the middle of nowhere on this road in between towns. And she's like, hey, you might be interested in this. I hear it's kind of good. And so she just dropped me off, and when she came back, I'm like, that was amazing. So, comes highly recommended if you ever find yourself in Australia. So,
I never been.
I guess as an artist, at my age, I start to think about my legacy. I start to think about what I'm going to leave behind. Most of the artwork that I've done in my lifetime has been very transient, very temporary. Nothing that is going to hang in a museum or nothing that I can leave behind that people are going to remember me by. And so I start to think about those types of things, particularly when I think about the William Ricketts exhibit and things like that. It's like, wow, I kind of feel like maybe I need to leave a more lasting impression. I don't know what that is yet, but I'll figure it out eventually. So.
Yeah. It's hard to decide when you're doing like the whole range of works. And What do you do in your spare time?
I really try to relax and decompress. I'm all about self-care, and I'm very into listening to my body. And when I feel particularly overwrought, stressed out, like life's getting to me, work's getting to me, in my spare time, I really like to relax. I like to do all that I can to kind of unplug from whatever it is that's distressing, and just be. I'm a happy person by nature. I kind of feel like life, politics, work, schedules, all of this stuff that we sort of have to deal with, isn't really me. Because I come from such, uh, I guess, a simple background. Grew up very simple, very plain, just kind of hardworking, basic. I kind of feel like that's where I want to be in my headspace, and so I don't really have any vices. I don't drink excessively. I do enjoy alcoholic beverages from time to time, but I certainly don't abuse it. Yeah, I don't smoke, although I do enjoy a cigar from time to time if it's a good one. But like sometimes you sort of get into this mindset that like, okay, I've got some free time, finally. How can I maximize my comfort and relaxation? And so I might have a whiskey on the rocks with a cigar sitting in my lawn chair in my front yard with the sunshine shining on my face on a Saturday. And that to me is absolute bliss. So beyond that, I try to do as much as I can with my kids. We go to national parks and go for nature hikes and go look at tidal pools and go for walks. And I bought the whole family electric scooters, so that we can kind of just scoot around down trails and go to places without just getting in a car and being stuck in a car the whole time. And so do a lot with my kids, wherever I can. And that's why I'm really hoping that this job change will occur here shortly so that I can have a little bit more free time. Because I'm working a lot of hours right now, and I'm just not. If I was working on a project that was really feeding my soul and I was really into it, that'd be one thing. But I really feel like I'm being sort of thrust into this unwillingly at this point, and so it's not as fun for me. And I'd really like to go back to a work pace that's a little bit more manageable, so that I have a little bit more free time. So.
A bit different question. If you would compare yourself to an animal, what would it be?
Well, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm a Leo, and I've always kind of identified as a lion. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into astrology, but you can't deny, that a lot of times it's fairly accurate.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, each I guess sign has positive and negative traits. A Leo can have very negative traits, but a Leo can also have some very, very positive traits. I try to embody the positive where I can. I'm very patient and very benevolent, but I'm still very powerful and kind of a born leader, so to speak. People tend to gravitate toward me, good, bad, or indifferent. And so I try to do the best I can to be a good person and convey the positive attributes of my personality where I can. I don't always succeed. I do the best I can.
Yeah. If you would start your body painting career again, would you do anything differently? Face and body painting career.
Yeah, we really were making it up as we went. We had no basis for comparison whatsoever. I have my wife to thank for pretty much all of that, because when she first discovered the body art and the face painting as a sort of a subculture, if you will, I didn't really want anything to do with it. To be honest, it was like forcing my way into a club where I wasn't wanted. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of wanted to make my own mark, but she insisted that I should go to some conventions. And I was like, well, why would I want to go to a convention to learn to paint when I already know how to paint? It was sort of my attitude. Because I mean, I was a accomplished painter outside of face painting.
Yeah.
You know, I just applied skill sets that I've already been using in other, you know, mediums to face painting. And so I kind of cheated. I didn't really learn to face paint. I just applied painting skills that I already had to that medium. And so I didn't, I guess, I mean, that might sound haughty, but that's just how I felt. And so she finally talked me into, after a time going into a convention in Central California, and I wound up having a blast. And because what I didn't count on was that I was going to get all the oohs and ahs for my artwork. And as an artist, we really like that. And that's kind of why we do art. We want people to appreciate, you know, our skill. And so I went there just as a student, just as an attendee. And I sat in the back of the classes, and I was going through the things and doing the drills and the exercises that everybody else was doing during the daily classes. But, you know, I was getting a lot of attention from the other people taking and attending the classes, because they're like, why are you taking classes? You know, look what you just painted, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, my wife made me do it. So then I wound up demoing a new paint. At least it was new then. Nobody had ever heard of it. And the gal that was selling it was a friend of ours, and she was real sweetheart, very, very kind and very meek and quiet. And she was kind of getting bullied by some of these other vendors that, you know, were kind of the old dogs that had been in the game for a while, and they were trying to force her out. You know, she was bad for their business, so they were trying to make her look bad. And so I thought I'd help her out, and I started demoing out of her sales booth and doing some paintings, and it turned into a sensation. And that's kind of, I think, where people started to take notice of me in the industry, and that one convention was definitely what ultimately led to me becoming a teacher myself. So once again, I mean, my wife kind of had to drag me kicking and screaming, you know, railing against my ego, but you know, it all worked out, you know, as it did. So,
what is the best piece of advice that you've been given?
That I've been given, or that I could give?
First, the first one first.
Well, the best advice came from Nick and Brian. When I first got into the industry, and this was partially due to my wife, there was definitely a drive to be secretive, to keep all of my tricks and all of my knowledge to myself, and not let everybody know how I do what I do. Because I was so different and I was so fast, and everybody else was taking 3 and 4 times longer than me and doing half the quality, and I was able to do a much higher quality in a very, very short amount of time. And because of the techniques that I developed in other mediums, and when we entered the business, in order to have a marketable stock in this industry, she felt like we needed to guard that information. And when I met Nick and Brian, they had a completely opposite philosophy. Their philosophy was, no, share everything. Don't be stingy about any of your knowledge. Be magnanimous. Be giving. He says it only makes the whole industry bigger and better. And if you elevate the entire industry, then it's just going to compound and grow, and then it's going to be better for everybody, not just you, kind of thing. And I didn't understand that philosophy. It didn't make any sense to me at the time. And I had to really get out of my comfort zone to kind of embrace that. as because I mean I did feel like it's like, well, I don't want to show you how I make my money because then you're gonna steal my business, you know. And there's a lot of that in our industry. But they took this entirely opposite tack by sharing everything and being super giving and magnanimous. Oh, here, let me show you how I do this. You know, I'll show you some tricks. It'll make you faster and better. Your stuff will look better. And so I adopted that mentality, and it was a huge relief. It's kind of like you can't get a positive from a negative, I guess, is the philosophy. And so when I started giving of myself and my knowledge more freely and openly, I started to enjoy it more. And it did pay dividends later on down the line. Maybe most specifically just with reputation and notoriety. I wouldn't say it really helped us monetarily, but for the most part, it made work a whole lot more comfortable. And so if I was to give any advice, that's what I would do. I mean, I know there's always going to be proprietary information with regards to products and things like that you're selling. You don't want to be giving that information to just anybody. But when it comes to techniques and skill sets and approaches to creating, I mean, the industry, when I first got involved, it was very plain. It was, I mean, the face paints that Nick and Brian were doing were the only interesting thing going on at the time. Okay. Pasher was doing what he called his beautiful nothings back then, but they were basically just random lines. And so I took Pasher's beautiful nothings and I turned it into something a little bit more structured with, more mathematically calculated Fibonacci type swirls and twirls. And all of a sudden everybody's doing swirls and twirls. And then the other thing too, that I contributed to the industry that not a lot of people were doing was I only painted cheeks. I never painted full faces. I don't think I painted a full face for the first 5 or 6 years that I actually face painted. All we did was just stuff on the side of the face and maybe on the forehead. And I came up with a lot of kind of 3/4 angle designs and cute little graphics that I would do on the cheeks, and I made a killing. I didn't have to paint full faces. Full faces to me seemed to take too long, and I could do these things faster. And they were more quaint. They were more customizable. They were more unique and independent to the person that was making the request, and it made it more fun for me because I can draw anything if I know what it is. And so if a person wanted a badger with a chainsaw, I mean, I could paint that on their cheeks. And so that was kind of where I gained my notoriety, and I developed some butterfly techniques and some the cheek dragons that everybody uses now. And because my wife ran the kids directory, the little magazine that I told you about at the beginning of our conversation, we made our own Contours magazine, which was kind of like a step-by-step how-to book, but it was in a small magazine form. Silly Farm sold those for a long time for us. I still have a bunch of them in a box. They're great little books for learning techniques and kind of like the Wolf Brothers books where it shows you a step-by-step breakdown of how you apply the layers to arrive at the finished product. Same concept, but. So I guess my advice to other people would be, hey, just, be sharing, be magnanimous. It all comes back to you eventually. When you do good things for other people, good things happen to you. You get what you give, so to speak, in a simpler term.
I see. Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Hopefully, marginally wealthy in a large art studio where I can make and work on a multitude of mediums in any way that I want to without the constraints of financial shortcomings.
Yeah. That's
very
what I'm
nicely
toward. Said. Very nicely said. You just put it in one sentence, which is like, it seems the perfect way of being as an artist. Yeah.
That would be a dream come true.
Yeah. So do you have any particular dream project that you can tell us about?
I always wanted to do a series of body paints on athletes. posed in a dynamic pose that was relevant to their sport, and then having the body paint work with the graphic, work with the movement of the model, as well as the movement of the art, and then do a series of photography with that. That's actually been in the back of my head for probably 15 years.
That sounds very, very
but
interesting.
I've never taken the time to organize something like that.
Yeah, but that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What are the main skills you think that help you to work as a face painter? But not artistic skills, your personal skills.
Patience. Patience. You gotta have patience.
Yes.
Dealing with misbehaving parents, maladjusted children, dealing with lines, cues, weather situations.
Yes.
You got to be an incredibly patient person to be a good face painter, I think.
Yeah.
So, and I tend to be. I mean, I'm human. I get agitated, with the best of them sometimes, but
Yeah.
I try not to show it outwardly as much as possible. That, and I think you just have to be healthy. The face painting is a lot more physically challenging and arduous than a whole lot of people realize, I think.
Yes. That's true.
When people find out that I'm a face painter, that I make my living face painting, they're like, "Oh, that's fascinating. So, what do you do for a living?" That's what I do for a living. And it's hard. It's hard on your back. It's hard on your neck. It's hard on your arms. It's hard on your feet. It's hard on your calves. I mean, it's challenging. Yeah. So you've got to be physically in the best shape you can possibly be in to kind of suffer that sort of onslaught of discomfort. You got to stay hydrated. You got to, my wife, I have her to thank for that. She literally I'll be painting nonstop, 12 hours straight, no bathroom breaks, and she'll be putting little pieces of food in my mouth and putting the bottled water up to my mouth while I'm in the process of painting, try to, keep me from collapsing.
Yes.
So.
Okay, we are now at the last question. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give someone wanting to break into the career of face and body art?
Well, when I first got into face painting, like I said, we had a very guarded, kind of almost a separatist kind of approach initially, where we really felt like we didn't want to align ourselves with other people in the industry. And then eventually we started the Western Washington Face Painting Forum, and we started to interact more and get other face painters involved in what we were doing. And we became a little more magnanimous in the sense that if a gig popped up and we couldn't do it, we could refer it to another face painter. And we were hoping that, that might, that courtesy might be returned to us in kind and so forth and so on. So we tried to really build a community in our area to avoid the hard, rivalries and competitions that seem to happen. I feel like we were successful for a while, but then it took one bad egg to kind of make the whole house of cards kind of come crashing down. One person, a very opportunistic person, started snaking jobs and being deceitful and stuff like that, and snaked some very, very big clients for me in a very unscrupulous way, let's just say. And then once she got the job, she gave it up. She quit, basically. She didn't realize how hard the job actually was that I was doing. And once she had stolen it from me, she didn't want it. And then she left the area. But unfortunately, the damage had been done in this community that we had sort of cultivated with all of the local artists. Everybody was now back to kind of, doing their own thing and not interacting and engaging anymore. There was a lot of distrust. So I would say put yourself out there, in a sense that you're available to help, and possibly be helpful, and to share of yourself and your time and your talents, but kind of watch your back. I mean, uh, I wouldn't say that I could have seen this coming, but I knew this person's character and I knew she was bad news. As a result of that, I didn't really associate with her as much as some of the other people in our group. But then ultimately that sort of worked against me because she felt inclined to kind of sabotage my work as a result of that. Maybe if I'd been a better friend and I'd been more magnanimous with her, maybe she would have felt another way and not have gone that direction.
Well,
You know what I'm saying? So I guess really work on your interpersonal relations with the people in your area, other artists that you'll be competing with. And if you can create and cultivate an environment where people are more sharing and giving and open, it'll save you a lot of frustration and fighting and stress. The worst part about our industry is it's very catty. It's very competitive, and there's a lot of people trying to chop the next person off at the knees to better their position. Whether it be in their area, their region where they're painting. It gets really bad in California. I mean, there's like territories. It's almost run by the mafia. I mean, you can't face paint in this neighborhood because that's her neighborhood. If you do, then she's going to retaliate, kind of thing, and I'm not exaggerating.
Okay.
So
I never had this like any situation like this. So for me, it sounds
working
weird.
next to a large metropolitan city and having that be the hub, it can get precarious, kind of, navigating those waters when you've got other face painters that would really like your position. Like I said, we were catering to Amazon and Microsoft and Boeing and some of the biggest companies in the area. And a lot of other face painters would have liked that business, so to speak. But so instead of being stingy about it, we incorporated them. We invited them to work with us. We kept them busy with work, and tried to kind of spread the wealth, so to speak. And like I said, that worked for a while, but
yeah, that definitely works to keep, just to be friends with everybody. Yeah.
Everything's different now after COVID. I think everyone's pretty much starting from scratch again. A lot of the events that we used to frequent, the long-term events that we would do, still aren't, opening up to having face painting back yet. Even with lowered restrictions. So it's still going to be a little bit of time before I think things catch back up to where they were, for face painters, at least over here anyway.
Yeah, the same probably here. I start getting requests from people, but not from companies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Still not quite there.
That was a lot of interesting information, a lot of insight into your life, into the face painter's life, and thank you very much for agreeing to meet with me and to talk to me. That was very pleasant. I'm really pleased that we met and we chat, and that was a very interesting talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.